Hi, I'm Maria Thea Harris of Velo Sews on social media. Welcome back to Sover 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style. Grab a cuppa, support this podcast on Patreon, and relax with us. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like and comment so more people can see as well as hear from our podcast guests. This is a two-part series with Melanie Keane. She's been sewing for less than 10 years. However, much of her knowledge of fabric and patterns has been enriched through her sewing groups that she's led at the Lighthouse in her local area. In this episode, Melanie gives us her sewing background and how she got involved in running sewing groups for refugees. Melanie, thank you for coming onto the podcast for Sover 50. I'm really pleased that Sandy nominated you, and I've been following you for a long time as well, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so nice to be here. And I have been listening to your podcast since almost the beginning. So thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. For the people who are watching on YouTube, I really love your mood board behind you.
I pop things up there that I like or something that I'm thinking about. I love trims. And then I've got a couple of special photos and cards, all sorts of things. It changes regularly.
Before we start talking about the community work that you've done, when did you start sewing?
Well, I started sewing probably about 9 years ago, and I was a complete beginner, and I started with patchwork. Yeah, it was very therapeutic, just stitching squares together. In fact, I still got that first quilt and we use it as a picnic blanket. So I really got into that and enjoyed that for 5 years. And then in 2020, with the pandemic, we all had to stay at home and make scrubs. So a friend of mine asked me if I could make some scrubs. She was a good dressmaker. And I said, well, I've never made anything, but I can make the bags. So then she taught me over Zoom, actually, because we couldn't meet. I had these pieces of fabric, these two legs actually, and I was trying to think, how do they go together? So she showed me. I started making scrubs and it went from there, got the whole family involved. I started a scrub hub and I got the bug then. So then after that, I thought, well, if I can make scrubs, I can make pajamas. So I made some for my twin sister and she loved them. So that was encouraging. I started dressmaking in 2020.
Your sewing has been sewing for other people as a starting point.
Yes.
For scrubs and for your sister.
Yes.
So it leads us to the community work that you do as well. So again, you've been a really giving person. Can you talk to us about the two projects that you have been working closely on?
Well, that all started with a charity called the Lighthouse in Woking. And my husband and I, we run the community lunch. So we started that in 2022. And we've been doing that for 3 years now. And there was a break in the summer for a month in August 22. And they were looking for volunteers to help on a holiday camp for the children. So we went along to the refugee centre and we enjoyed that. And towards the end of the summer, they asked if I knew anybody that could sew. And so I said, well, I can a bit. So they explained the problem, that the refugees had been living there for such a long time. They'd been there for over a year and they'd come to this country with so much hope and expectation and excitement. And a year later, they were stuck in a holding place and their mental health was starting to suffer. So the local community were looking for ways to lift their mood, ignite their interest, and they asked for sewing. 3 weeks later, I went along with 2 sewing machines and some fabric, and it all started from there, really. And we went from strength to strength. Oh, gosh, there's so many things I could tell you about it. But in summary, 15 months later, when it suddenly closed almost overnight,
Mm.
We had 15 to 20 women in the class. Well, it wasn't a class, it was just a group. I had 3 helpers. I was taking along 20, 25 meters of fabric each week. I can't remember how many sewing machines we had, but they certainly had to share. So what started as a little me with 2 machines ended up being this huge machine which needed feeding every week, and I needed help, which the sewing community came forward with when I put a shout out on Instagram. So that's how that started. Suddenly that one closed almost overnight.
Yep.
We turned up to the centre to do our regular session and everybody had gone. It was like the Marie Celeste. There was just bits of rubbish here and there. And it was deserted. So there's various reasons for that. But
yeah,
we were all quite disappointed. So we were still volunteering for the community lunch. And I asked them if they'd like to offer sewing as one of their pastoral groups. So they jumped at the chance. So I had machines, I had fabric, and I started up in January. So the refugee centre closed beginning of December, and then I started up the first week in January at the Lighthouse in Barnesbury. So it's quite a different group. It's a whole different thing altogether. There's no comparison really apart from sewing machines and fabric.
Mm-hmm. From your experience, when you were initially asked to offer sewing to the refugee group to help with their mental health, was there any explanation why they picked sewing as that activity to help them?
Once I'd been there for a few weeks, I realised that these women, their traditional way of looking after their family and nurturing them was through cooking them meals, providing comfort, and a lot of them were very experienced on the sewing machine. They'd been sewing for years, they'd been brought up at their grandma's knee sewing, they made their own clothes, they did alterations, but they just didn't have the resources.
Yeah.
So I think these women asked for sewing, they asked for cooking. We couldn't provide cooking straight away, but sewing was something that we could get started with. They also offered a cycling club, reading, and of course they all did English lessons because none of them could speak English. Only the children that could speak English.
Yeah.
And that's a funny story because when I first started, the language was a complete barrier because they all spoke different languages. I would have a phone thrust in front of me with Google Translate, even for simple things. And then after a while, I thought, well, why am I doing this? Because they're here in England. They need to learn English. So I labelled everything and then I just spoke in English. We made ourselves understood and they picked up all the sewing words.
That's great.
Yeah, it was interesting. Another thing I saw, we're talking about community, was that the refugees came from all different countries. So they all spoke different languages and they all had quite different cultures.
Right.
And what I found at the beginning was that these different cultures didn't really mix with each other. So I didn't allow children or food and drink in the class for obvious reasons. And so some of the women would say, we can't come because no one to look after our children. And I suggested that they share the childcare. One week they come and the next week their friend comes and they share the childcare. That didn't seem like an option for them.
Okay.
Because of the cross-cultural thing. But then after a few months, things changed. And I could see in the group that they were mixing. They were smiling and trying to communicate. And if someone had a problem with a pattern or fitting, they were talking. And that gave me a lot of pleasure to see that the communities were starting to knit. Yeah, that was nice.
That's good. That's really good that you saw that change in those varying cultures over that period of time helping each other.
Yes, yeah. And I was just thinking about it this morning.
Yeah.
And sewing just brings people together.
Mm.
I've met so many wonderful people, and we vary in age and style and what fabrics we like.
Yeah.
But we're friends because of this wonderful sewing community.
Yep.
And shared
And
passion.
the other question I had about the group, the original group, and probably the one that you've got, when you had to every week bring 25 meters of fabric,
Yeah.
how did you do that? Like,
Well, it started up slowly, and the machines I started with, they were quite basic, and for a
yep.
while we had basic machines and fabric. People donated fabric. I put something on Facebook Marketplace actually,
Mm-hmm.
and people donated locally. That wasn't sufficient, so Yvette from Stash Hull, she
Mm-hmm.
saw my shout out, and she said, well, maybe I can help because I've got this audience here with huge stashes. Maybe we can work together. And so she put a shout out, and that started. And then I became bold and brave. I approached companies, went into shops, and just asked them. Yeah, one particular shop I went in, and I thought, shan't I? And I asked, and I came out with 3 bolts of cotton.
Oh my goodness, that's so good.
So people were really good,
Mm.
really good. And people just got to know of what I was doing because it was quite unique then. And
Mm.
everybody was interested in refugees. There was a lot in the news about processing refugees. So people wanted to help and they didn't know exactly what it meant. So they wanted to find out more. It was quite a big job sort of managing all of that because it would come in big parcels or even small parcels, always with a nice little note,
Mm-hmm.
which was really sweet. And so I would trim up the fabrics. Some of them I needed to wash, and when I took them to the refugee centre, they had a similar experience to us. They had something nice to look at.
Yeah.
They could choose. It opened my mind to fabrics, all sorts of different fabrics, and what you could do with them.
Mm.
Because I might look at a piece of fabric and it might be bright, it might have sparkles on it, or stretch or cotton. It wouldn't be to my taste, but I'd take it along and someone would snap it up
Mm-hmm.
and make something wonderful. So big companies were very generous as well. The Fold Line, which is a big company in the UK, they featured us on one of their sessions. And Janome were very generous with providing some machines. I became an expert, actually, Maria, in fixing machines. People would give me their second-hand machines,
Yeah.
all very well-intentioned.
Yeah.
But often they were given to me because they were buying a new one because they were fed up with this one.
Yep.
And so I was an expert. I can fix all different types of machines.
When it came to fixing machines to start off with, did anyone teach you or how did you learn?
Well, I looked on YouTube. I watched a lot of YouTube videos about bobbins and tension and just trial and error, really. And some of the women could fix machines. They were amazing, really amazing. They had such skills. So then I decided that I needed new machines. So we started fundraising for that. I had some coffee mornings. People were very generous. Janome gave us some good deals, and FAF as well. I still spend a lot of time sort of looking at tension issues and bobbins and things, but
Yeah.
it's not such a problem.
With this new group, were then able to utilize the machines and fabrics for this new group?
I was, although some of the machines had been so well used that they were coming to the end of their life.
Yep.
So yeah, I did use some of them, and I sold a couple of them and then was able to buy a new machine. And then we've just had a sophisticated event last year,
Mm-hmm.
which was held at the Lighthouse. And with the money we raised from there, we were able to buy 3 machines. We were given a big discount. FAF gave us a machine and we bought an overlocker. So now we're all set. We've got fantastic equipment. And yeah, of course, the fabric. This is where I sew, but downstairs in the dining room are boxes of fabrics, all different types, winter types,
Yep.
summer. So I do need to keep some stash, and we still do need bits and pieces. Yeah, I've got a stash downstairs, which people have generously donated. And I have to keep the two of them quite separate, Maria.
I
What
can
goes down
imagine.
doesn't come up. It might be admired downstairs, but I have to be quite strict with myself.
From what you've described, you've started sewing recently, but through the experiences of seeing how the refugee group and this current group are looking at fabric and coming up with their ideas, that's really adding to your learned experience now, isn't it?
Oh, definitely, Maria. And from the refugee centre, I learnt so many things. I learnt that it's a waste of time. Just keep faffing and deliberating about pattern and fabric and stretch. With regards to sewing, I'm a big deliberator and procrastinator. It's got to be the right fabric, the pattern, all of those kind of things. But the women didn't worry about that. They looked at the fabric, decided what they were going to make, and then just got on with it. And if the fabric worked, brilliant. They would make it work. And they would take trims, all sorts of diamante or ribbons, and they just make something wonderful. And the other thing I learned was about measuring. They would measure a metre or how much they needed from here to the end of their arm. And then they didn't need a pattern. They'd say to me sometimes, do you have a pattern? So I'd pick out a pattern and we'll trace it. But all they wanted to do was to look at the picture. They wanted to look at the picture and then get an idea of how they might make it. And then off they'd go. And often 2 hours later, they'd come back and they'd made something. And the other thing I learned was about alterations and mending. It doesn't have to be perfect. If it's an improvement on the garment before it was altered or mended, just fix it. So if I was to sum it up, for me, it would be to be bold and be brave and just go for it. Try things. Don't worry too much about all the little details. And for fitting, they would knit behind a screen, try it on, and then their friend would come and pin it. So they'd whip it off and then take it back to the machine. They didn't have all this grading and all those things. Well, I learned a lot about fabrics and all about different shapes and sizes. There was one young girl. She was a good sewer, actually, and she had an amazing figure and some of the things that she produced. And I actually had to teach myself how to make a few things. I mean, a pillowcase might sound quite easy, but just how to turn it inside out and how to do all the corners and put trim on it and things like that. So I watched a few YouTube videos because they love to make things to make their room. They were basically a family would be living in 1 or 2 rooms. They wanted to make it a bit more homely.
Yeah.
So they'd be making cushions, pillowcases, bunting even, just to brighten up their rooms.
Because they ended up being their possessions and it would show who they are in whatever room they had available to them.
Yeah, I think so. And another thing as well is with the sewing, we show our children things. They had nothing to make their children proud of them. So, if they made them a little outfit or altered their school uniform or something like that, the women got pleasure from that. You'll see on my Instagram posts and things, they always wanted me to take a photo. They loved showing me what they'd made. So you'll see lots of photos of garments they've made, but obviously without the heads because they need to be anonymised. It just lifts my heart talking to you about it and just remembering how much fun it was. It was very challenging, but I got out as much as, people say, oh, you spend a lot of your time helping others, but I get out just as much. Sometimes I think I get out more. It's brought me to some amazing experiences and I've met so many lovely people.
That's the end of episode 1 with Melanie Keane. The effect of running these sewing groups will be discussed in next week's episode. This episode of Sew Over 50 podcast on Sew Organised Style was video and audio produced by me, Maria Theoharis, in my sewing room with permission of Melanie. Sound by Kneef on YouTube. Many thanks for the ongoing support of the podcast Patreon contributors. Their ongoing support enables me to develop this podcast for you for free. Make sure you direct message Sandy and the editors at Sew50 on Instagram to contribute to the ongoing posts and challenges the team provides to the community of over 53,000 followers. You can subscribe to Sew Organised Style Podcast, but with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps. Make sure you go back and listen to our free Sew50 podcast archive on Sew Organised Style Podcast. I look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.